Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
And essentially we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is life illuminated. By Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan. Acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians, a Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology, look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. We have a return guest. He's known really as Marcia Freeman's husband. This is true.
That is absolutely true.
The
Yes.
author's wife.
Yes.
Brian Freeman, who has become a favorite and has been with us before. I won't go into the awards that he's won because we don't want to shoot the whole program on that. But he did win the Minnesota Book Award this past year in 2019. Right. And he has just completed the next Jason Bourne book, the series made famous by Robert Ludlum. And it's been really, really accepted wholeheartedly by the publisher and by the family, and you're now about to work on the next
I'll
Jason.
be getting started on the next one, exactly.
So,
that's right.
But at the moment, you have a book that just came out this week. And I won't talk about the Jonathan Stride series, and you're going to have another Jonathan Stride book out this summer.
In September, yes.
Yeah, and I won't talk about the Frost Easton series because you got to sleep sometime. but Thief River Falls is just out this week, and it is the most unusual of your books that I have read.
I think that's true. And I always try to create emotional thrillers that are really going to engage people's hearts as well as get their adrenaline pumping. And for me, I think Thief River Falls does exactly that. I've had so many wonderful comments from readers already who've been glued to the pages. They have to keep turning the pages to find out what happens next, and then they've gotten to the ending and they've said the ending just hit them with a wallop and left them in tears. And for me, that's kind of the highest honor you can get as a writer.
Well, as I told you, and Sharon and I both were fortunate enough to get an advance copy, and not only is it a psychological thriller, but it is so different from what we've had. And it's about Lisa Powers, who is an author who happens to be from Thief River Falls, which is a real location here in Minnesota.
It is, although we have to convince people of that sometimes. My editors in New York, they were like, really, that's a real place? You didn't make that up? I was like, no, Thief River Falls is a real place.
We have some strange names.
We do.
So but I love cities you can go through.
I love the romance and drama of the name Thief River Falls. I've wanted to use it for a book for a lot of years. I finally found just the right story to go along with it.
Well, Lisa Powers, who wrote the novel Thief River Falls, which is the subject of the book Thief River Falls, is really pursued by a dark star. The dark star is psychological. People around her keep dying.
Yeah.
And someplace along in the book, someone actually says, can you possibly, or do you think you're living the story that you wrote, something to that effect?
Yeah.
But there is a young boy who is subject of the book also. You haven't had a lot of young boys in your books.
Yeah, that's true. It was Lisa was sort of a familiar character for me to write because Lisa does what I do. She's a thriller writer, and so I had the opportunity to kind of bring out some things in her that are very close to me and close
Very
to my
unique
heart.
young boy who didn't have a memory of terrible events that he had endured.
Yeah, he's
Excuse
the
me.
Jason Bourne of the young children in my books.
His name is Purdue.
Purdue for the French Lost. Exactly.
I understand that you first picked Gopher, but that didn't go so well. So you went to Purdue, which certainly is one of our visiting cities.
Yes,
And,
yes.
Yeah. But it's so different.
It is. Yeah, yeah. It's
We both had the same feeling, Sharon and I, about the book.
Yeah, and part of it for me is I've written more than 20 novels at this point, and I look around at what's out in the marketplace, and there's some great authors, some great stories out there, but I never want readers to feel like I'm going to do the same thing. I always want each book to be very unique and distinctive, and to have its own kind of heart and core to it, and so Thief River Falls is in some ways a departure for me. I mean, it's a very different kind of story from some of the things I've told in the past, and yet I think when people read it, they immediately know, yeah, this is a Brian Freeman novel, and it's got all those twists and turns that keep you turning the pages.
And unusual, when I read a book, that I don't sneak ahead 2 or 3 pages, which I found myself doing time and again in this book. Or something.
You're cheating though, Alan. You're
Yeah,
not
I
supposed to do that.
know, I know, but how is she going to get out of this?
Right,
How is he
right.
going to? It was really that type of a page turner, and fascinating book.
Good.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
I know you're doing some, I guess, signings.
Yeah, I was just at the Once Upon a Crime bookstore in Minneapolis. Wonderful, one of the nation's top mystery bookstores, and I'll be at the all new Barnes and Noble in Woodbury, my hometown, next Saturday the 15th from 11 to 1. So a great opportunity for folks to come out, see the new store, and pick up a signed copy of the book.
And let's give the date on that one.
That's Saturday, February 15th from 11 to 1 at the Barnes & Noble in Woodbury.
Because we're now in 34 cities, including Woodbury, so
Wonderful.
You may get a little spillover from that, and so you have established a style, or several styles, really. The difference between Frost Easton and Jonathan Pryde.
Sure.
2 main characters, but one much more psychological than the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you jump over to Jason Bourne and
Right.
Robert Ludlum. What do you have to do to become Robert Ludlum, to keep his style going as opposed to making it another?
Yeah. It was a fascinating writing experience taking over the Jason Bourne series. I mean, I've been a Robert Ludlum fan my whole life. The Bourne Identity was one of my all-time favorite thrillers. I can remember reading it back in 1980 when I was a teenager.
I have also.
Yeah,
and,
just tremendous. And so many people in recent years have rediscovered the Bourne Identity and the character of Jason Bourne because of the Matt Damon movies. And so all sorts of interesting expectations for me as a writer thinking about this, because I'm thinking of the Ludlum book and the character. You've got a lot of folks that are thinking of the Matt Damon movies. You've got a lot of folks
possible
that read
screenplay coming out of it.
Well, you never know. You've got a lot of folks that got to know the Eric von Lussbader Jason Bourne novels. So I was trying to kind of keep a lot of different audiences happy, and I talked to my editor about it, and he said, ultimately you've got to write your own story, and if you try to sort of imitate Ludlum's style, it's going to feel forced, and so it really is a Brian Freeman novel, but I'm really trying to embrace what Ludlum was trying to do with his character. And I really wanted to go back to sort of what made Jason Bourne such a distinctive, iconic character in that original novel, and bring out kind of that fractured sense of his personality that makes him very distinctive in the thriller world.
And the title is The Bourne Evolution.
The Bourne Evolution.
Which will be out
July 28th is the release date.
right after my birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
And right after Daniel Silva's latest book is released, who I follow every year.
Very good, absolutely. And is it another Gabriel Allon's?
I understand it is.
Very good.
It's a very, very interesting way he has perpetuated that series also. Now, talking style. I mentioned to you that I'm reading a James Patterson at the moment, one that he actually didn't have.
An actual Patterson.
Yeah, an actual Patterson. He writes short sentences
and short chapters.
Short paragraphs and short chapters, 2, 3 pages, 4 pages.
Yeah, they're usually no more than 750 words, that's right.
Very unique style.
Yeah.
As you go into Ludlum, do you have to accommodate the Ludlum style, or is it still Brian Freeman style presenting a Bourne book?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I was not trying to emulate Ludlum's style, and I think I mean, he had a very distinctive writing style. It was very, adrenaline filled. It was very propulsive, and I didn't want to try to imitate Ludlum, but I wanted readers to sort of feel his shadow throughout the book. So I think when you read The Bourne Evolution, you're going to feel Ludlum's presence in that book along with mine. And certainly in terms of the plot and the characters, I think fans of The Bourne Identity, particularly the original book, will find a lot of little echoes that I deliberately threw in because I wanted to sort of pay homage to the original book throughout this book. And
you have to sort of bring up the history for the new reader also.
Well, and you need and the history needs to change, because the thing is, this is sort of a reboot of the Jason Bourne series. I mean, the original novel came out in 1980. Jason Bourne's roots are back in Vietnam. Well, you're writing a book here set in 2020. You can't really have sort of that same backstory for the character. So I was essentially trying to sort of reintroduce the character in a new modern setting, and still have that character feel authentic to what Ludlum created.
Did they give you any parameters as to what the book should encompass, or is it all Freeman?
They just said, don't screw it up. No, no, they really gave me a lot of free rein. When I first was selected to get things rolling, I came up with a plot concept. I wrote some sample chapters for them. Putnam loved it. The estate loved it. We went back and forth on a few things. They really. They gave me a lot of freedom in terms of kind of creating.
And this is a little bit different
book,
than what you normally, you're writing for your publisher normally. Here you're writing for your publisher, but the family of the world famous author.
Exactly.
And if they don't like it, thumbs down. So
sure.
They jumped on it, and I understand they really, really enjoyed it.
They loved it. They had absolutely no changes that they were looking for in the manuscript at all, which I gather is pretty unusual in these circumstances. So that made me feel real good. And I hope it comes through in this book that I am such a enormous fan of Robert Ludlum and Jason Bourne in particular. He was such an inspiration to me as a reader and as a writer. So it's just a tremendous honor for me to be doing this. It's one of the great achievements of my creative life.
Working in a bookstore, wearing glasses, and getting ready for senior citizenship is going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, that would be a surprise, I think. Yeah.
But there's a certain amount of violence in Ludlum books.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So you have to think about that and incorporate it, because it's a little bit different than Jonathan Stride and Frost
It is,
Easton.
yeah. I mean, it's not sort of psychological in the same way, and it's not sort of police procedural in the same way. It's more adrenaline based. It's more action based. But I can remember in years ago reading an interview with Ludlum, and he talked about the fact that when someone gets hit in one of his books, he wants them and the reader to feel the pain. He doesn't want them to, just sort of shrug it off and move on. And I think we've got so many, thriller heroes out there now that are just kind of superheroes. And I didn't want that in this book, and I don't think that's what Jason Bourne was in the Ludlum books. I mean, this is a character that's gone through a lot of
Captain America.
No, exactly.
And he's not Superman.
Yeah.
He is a Superman in what he accomplishes, but he accomplishes it as a human being.
Yes, and with a lot of loss and a lot of suffering along the way as well. Exactly.
And well, that had to be a challenge, and
It was,
really
but-
looking forward to
Yeah, it was.
reading
It's also, I think, the most fun I've had, writing a book in a long time. It was really enjoyable for me to sort of inhabit this character that I love and feel a little bit of Robert Ludlum's ghost kind of cheering me on. It was a very special experience.
But at the same time, we have another Jonathan Stride book.
We do,
coming
yeah,
out.
yeah. It's going to be a busy year. We've got Thief River Falls out now. The Bourne book comes out on July 28th, and then Jonathan Stride is back in Duluth on September 22nd. The new title is Funeral for a Friend. So the Stride book's out September 22nd. And just in case 3 books is not enough, last year I did an audiobook original for Audible called The Deep, Deep Snow, which they had tremendous success with. It hit the New York Times
it went
bestseller
viral
list.
practically.
Yeah, it was #1 on the Audible bestseller list, but it was last year it was an audio exclusive. It's now available in ebook, and then as of October, a paperback edition will be arriving as well. So you won't be able to get away from Brian Freeman this year.
I've got my reading stacked up for me.
Very good.
Now, you went to Carleton College,
I did. So did Marcia. Yeah.
and is that where you met?
That's where we met. I was her next door neighbor.
Really? And the rest, as they say, is history.
She had rented one of those little mini fridges for her room, and it got delivered to our room instead because she was gone, and so I carried in her fridge for her, and that's where it all started.
And unusual with authors also, every book you have written is dedicated the same way for Marcia.
Yes, absolutely. I always say she gets the first 2 words in every book.
And she gets the first look at it also.
She does. She's my first reader, my first editor, and she just plays an enormously important role in helping strengthen, polish, improve every single book.
And of course, in addition to that, you're living in Woodbury, spending a lot of time in Minnesota. You also won for, what was it? The Voice Inside.
That was the Minnesota Book Award. Yes, I won for The Voice
Last year's
Inside.
Minnesota Book Award.
Yeah. Well, they picked one of my San Francisco novels for the Minnesota Book Award. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, but most of your novels are centered in Minnesota,
More than half, I'd
Yeah.
say, are Minnesota-based books. Yeah,
and including Thief River Falls,
including Thief River Falls. That's right.
which
Yeah.
people will not believe happens to be a city in Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, I'll actually be up in Thief River Falls on April 23rd, speaking at the library up there. So I'm looking forward to coming into town and seeing what the locals thought about this book.
Yeah. It is a deeply psychological
Yes.
thriller.
Yeah. Very very psychological, very emotional. Yeah.
And it really is. As I said, I kept sneaking a peek ahead, and leaves some questions at the end. I mean,
Yeah,
there was a great write-up in the Pioneer Press.
Yeah. That was wonderful. They gave it a great review, and I actually include book club discussion questions for the book out on my website. Of course, there's spoilers in there, so I always tell people don't look at the questions until you've read the book. But this kind of book, I think, is just made for book clubs. I think it just invites people to talk about the nature of the book and what's going on and the characters. It's just a perfect book club discussion book.
Yeah. And it's got the rich, it's got the poor, it's got this young boy Purdue, who really should be named Gopher, but that's the way. And the fact that he has been witness to a horrible event and he
Right.
has no memory, basically only a foggy dream, and I'm not going to discuss any more than that about it, but people will really, really be intrigued by that. Now, when you're deciding to write your next novel, what do you start with? You start with an idea, you start with a plot, you start, obviously, if it's a Stride book or a Frost Easton book, you start with the character, but
Sure.
then how do you build around them?
Yeah. Obviously, if you're talking about a series book, I start thinking about what has happened in the lives of the characters, and I start letting the events shape itself from there. So I always tell people when it comes to Jonathan Stride, Stride is a different man in Funeral for a Friend than he was all the way back in 2005 in my first book, Immoral, because of all the things that have happened to him along the way. And I want these characters to be three-dimensional. I want them to leap off the page and feel real to the reader. And that means that as events kind of shape their lives, they evolve as characters. And I think that's one of the things that readers enjoy, is being able to watch those characters evolve through the books. With a standalone novel, it's a different experience because you're starting out completely fresh with all new characters and all new story. The ideas come from a lot of different places. I mean, sometimes I kind of keep a file of notes, and it may just be a theme I want to explore, an issue I want to bring out, a character that's got an interesting background I may make a note of, a true crime I may read about in the paper that I take notes about. And then when it comes time to thinking through a book, I kind of overturn that file the way you would kind of take your nightstand drawer and pour it on the bed to start organizing it. And I look for threads and connections and things that kind of start tying the story together. And sometimes it happens very quickly. Thief River Falls, the story really just took shape in my head in a very short period of time. Sometimes it can be a few weeks of sort of banging my head against the wall trying to look for those connections.
But not writer's block.
No, I find writer's block kind of gets in the way of my eating, so I try not to allow that to happen.
Now, we're talking about contemporary novels. We're talking about really some things that are happening now. When it comes to something political, where are your parameters?
Usually I deal with a lot of tough issues in the books. I don't have a lot of politics in the novels. I have a lot of tough themes and issues that I bring out, and I never want to sort of pretend that any issue is black or white or right or wrong. I like to bring out an issue in all of its shades of gray, and I want to kind of lay it out
Maybe
for the
even 50
reader.
shades of gray.
Yeah, you said you wanted to talk about sex. There we go. I like to lay it out and let the reader draw their own conclusions, and I like to sort of have these characters embody the nuances of every issue. So I don't shy away from those issues. Certainly in the Stride novels, I've dealt with a lot of very difficult issues in different novels, from Marathon to mass shootings in Goodbye to the Dead. So there's all sorts of tough issues in there, but I don't think anyone could read any of my books and have a clue about my own politics. And for me, that's the way it should be. I mean, I know there are authors.
I think you're right there.
I mean, authors sometimes stake out public positions on politics. You'll never see me doing that, because I think that reading and books should be ways to bring people together, and it should get people talking, and it should help people find common ground. And if you're, as an author, staking out divisive positions, then you're immediately starting to split people apart. And I think that's the last thing that you should be doing with books.
Now, you mentioned sex, which we talked about briefly before the interview.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Because yours are not what we call graphic sexual novels. So.
Well, and they're not now. I mean, I think if you go back to some of my early books, the earliest Jonathan Stride novels, I think they were more explicit when it came to sexuality. I guess I've just gotten older. No, I think that the whole point of when sex would be in a novel for me is it helping the reader to understand the character, and is it giving you an insight into the character that you really can't get any other way. So if you go all the way back to my very first novel, Immoral, there's a very explicit sexual scene in there with Stride and a woman he's met recently. And readers have sometimes asked me about that scene, and I say, based on what happens in the book, that scene's absolutely essential, because it helps you understand right from the get-go some of the fractures that are involved in that relationship. And I don't think you could have really explored that or shown that any other way. But I think there's less of it in my later novels, because I think that it's, there are less of sort of sexual themes going on in some of my plots.
What about
and I'm
language?
Exploring different. Language is the same way. I think you'll find a little bit harsher language in some of the early novels, and I've sort of tried to go away from that in my later books, and think you won't. In fact, in the Frost Easton books and Thief River Falls, you won't find any any bad language at all. And it's not because I'm a prude about such things or I don't feel it has a place in books. But if it's being used in a book, then it should again be sort of explaining the character. And if it's something a character would be doing, fine. But if you're doing it just for the shock value, well, then I don't really think that's advancing
as opposed to Sandra Brown or John Sanford, who pretty much don't have any parameters around language.
Yeah, and I mean that's an author's choice, and certainly again, you go back to some of my earlier books, I think you'd find more of that. But I just don't. I use it when it's going to help the reader understand the character better, and independent of that, I tend to steer clear of it these days.
What about social issues?
You'll find a lot of social issues in my books, and same way I try to deal with it in all of the shades of gray. You're not going to find me laying out any issue and trying to claim that it's easy or black and white, and that there's not a lot of moral complexity on both sides of it.
It's something that society is enduring, so you treat it that way.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's
without
part of
taking
the
a
thriller.
position necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It would be like pro-abortion and anti-abortion. Well, we know that that's a big issue in our society.
Sure.
You would present it with both sides of that issue.
Right, and in fact, in my novel Spilled Blood, which was the one that won the Thriller Award for best hardcover novel, I mean there are some abortion issues that come up in Spilled Blood, and I tried to deal with it in a way that would not take out any kind of stance on the issue, and on some level, I suppose at some point I do these things, and it may piss off everybody in the book, but I'm hoping that readers will see that I'm trying to deal with nuances in a way that will get them talking and thinking.
So there's a lot that you have to think about when you're approaching these things.
Sure.
And how many drafts would you say the average book? We don't have too much time left.
Yeah, I would say probably 8 to 10 drafts by the time I'm all through. I go through it several times before it even gets in Marcia's hands, and then I go through it again with her feedback, and usually a couple more times after that, and then it goes to the publisher and a couple more times after that. So there's
A draft is, of course, not a complete rewrite.
No, I'm editing, polishing. I'm looking for how can I get my point across as suspensefully and efficiently as possible, and build that drama for the reader.
They're never really done.
No, you could hand me one of my books, in print today, and I'd pick it up with a red pen and start editing. So,
But keep editing, keep writing.
I will.
We're talking with Brian Freeman, who has been a frequent guest now, and very exciting what has happened and transpired in terms of your career in the few years that we know you, to the point where if the whole country didn't know you, the whole country knows you now. And it's always a pleasure to have you come down here and share with us.
I always enjoy it, Alan.
And I thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck on the Thief River Falls,
Thank
which
you.
got wonderful reviews. And good luck with Ludlam, and good luck with Jonathan Stride. And
I'll be back here soon.
we're looking forward to it. Thank you.